Hi, what you see on your screen right now, this is the Roku, and this is an AVR home theater surround sound system. And behind us here is a pretty typical television. Welcome to our channel all about home electronics, where in this video we're going to walk you through the steps and explain the steps of how to connect a Roku to an AVR surround sound home theater system. And we're going to get started right after this. Now, the Roku that we're going to be using in this demonstration video is the Roku Ultra, which is labeled as HD 4K HDR. You might not be connecting this particular Roku to your AVR. You might be connecting an older Roku, or you might be connecting a new, more modern Roku. Regardless of the age of your Roku, and regardless of the age, make, or model of your AVR home theater system, the steps that we're going to demonstrate will help you make the correct connections, and will also show you one or two of the settings on your AVR home theater system as well as your TV to make sure you're maximizing the features available to your particular equipment. So to begin, we need to discuss the HDMI cable. Now, we mentioned the HDMI cable, and chances are good that most viewers are familiar with an HDMI cable. If you're not, here's what the end of that wire looks like. However, not all HDMI wires are made the same, and this is an important distinction to point out because, as with the case of this particular Roku, the 4K HDR, if you're intending to view that content, it's imperative that you're connecting your Roku to your AVR using the appropriate HDMI cable. In other words, if I look on the side of the jacket of this HDMI cable, and this is not always the case, but it's usually the case, it's going to say something like high speed. And that's the cable that we'll be using in this demonstration. Now, if you don't care whether you view 4K content or not, then the HDMI cable will tend not to be as important. The other note that we want to make before we demonstrate the connections is just because you're connecting a 4K capable Roku, it doesn't mean you're actually going to view 4K on your display. You'll need to have a 4K enabled Roku, a 4K enabled AVR home theater system, the right HDMI cable, plugged in the correct way, and the settings in your TV set up correct, including a 4K capable television itself. Again, as we mentioned earlier, if you don't care about 4K or 8K or some other higher resolution content, the steps that we're getting ready to show you still will work for your particular device. Based on previous questions we get asked on our YouTube channel, we want to highlight what does not come in the box. The HDMI cable does not come with this Roku HD 4K HDR. So now what you're looking at is we went ahead and spun our example AVR home theater surround sound system so that we can see the back panel. Chances are pretty good the back panel of your AVR does not look identical to this one. However, if you have HDMI ports, then you'll still be able to follow along in this video. If by chance your surround sound system does not have HDMI ports, at the end of this video we're going to post a link to how you can convert the HDMI output of your Roku to a red, white, and yellow input so that it could connect to your surround sound receiver. Regardless, we're only going to focus now on making an HDMI connection to the back of our AVR surround sound receiver. Now, It even says it on the side of the box, but we know from experience that in order for the Roku to pass 4K content through your AVR up to your 4K TV, you have to make the connection to a 4K capable receiver. Let me explain. The first step, naturally, would be to take either end of a high-speed HDMI cable and plug it into the back of the Roku. Make sure it's all the way seated into the HDMI port. Now, here's the step that can get a little confusing for a lot of viewers, and that is, which of the HDMI ports should I plug it into on the back of my AVR home theater surround sound system? If it's important to you to get high definition 4K, 8K or better content, then you're going to want to plug the other end of that HDMI cable into a port which supports the passing of that particular content. Now, in our example AVR here, these three HDMI ports are listed as HDCP 2.2. On the box, and I don't know if you can read this on your screen, but it specifically says for 4K HDR, you will need a 4K HDR compatible device with an HDCP 2.2 HDMI port. So naturally, we're going to take the other end of that HDMI cable and plug it into one of those compatible ports. I've simply chosen port number 3 for no particular reason other than to demonstrate it would be okay if your AVR surround sound system has 3 compatible ports to put it in port number 3. Now, if your AVR does not have the capacity to pass an HD CP 2.2 signal, it would be completely okay to hook your Roku up to a different HDMI port, and I'll show you now. I simply unplugged from port 3 and moved it over to port number 5. And I want to make sure that I memorize that it is port number 5, because when we turn the AVR around to the front, we're going to want to set the AVR to port number 5 in the settings. And in case you missed it, in this particular configuration, we might still be able to enjoy high definition content on our television, like 720 or 1080, depending on what your equipment is capable of. However, there would not be the capacity if you're using this particular Roku to enjoy 4K content. And I keep using the word content, and I need to explain what the word content actually means. I think we mentioned this earlier in the video. We want to clarify, just because you're connecting a 4K device does not mean you're going to actually see 4K. The content that you want to view has to be content that was filmed in and is broadcast in 4K. And that content could be limited. As you notice here on the face of the box, they list all the apps that are available in the Roku Ultra, but only down here does it say 4K Spotlight. What they're trying to tell us is that not everything is 4K. However, as time passes and years pass, 4K content will become more of the norm as opposed to not so readily available today. Now, when you're hooking your Roku up to your AVR, you need to make sure that your AVR is properly connected to your TV display, and we're going to quickly demonstrate that. We're going to take a second high-speed HDMI cable, and in the case of our AVR Surround Sound home theater system, we only have one output, which coincidentally is labeled HD CPP 2.2 and ARC. If yours does not say that, don't worry. Still, you can plug in to the HDMI output. You just won't have all of the features that we'll have in our demonstration here that come with HDCP 2.2 and ARC. Taking that second HDMI cable, plug either end into the output. Now we've zoomed into the connections on the back of our example television, and we can see the HDMI labeling here as well. And what we'll do is we'll take the other end of that HDMI cable and we're going to plug it into HDMI port number 1, which is labeled ARC, which is audio return channel. And the reason that we're doing it is because we want our television to be able to communicate with our AVR receiver and be able to send commands back and forth over that HDMI wire. And that topic is outside the scope of this particular video. However, we'll put a link at the end of this video that will explore ARC a little more carefully to help you understand it if you have some questions. Again, we simply line the other end of that HDMI wire and plug it into ARC HDMI 1 and make sure it's fully seated. Alright, so we've turned all of our equipment around so it faces us from the front. And we want to make sure, of course, that the Roku has power. So go ahead and plug in your power adapter. And naturally, make sure your TV's turned on, as well as your AVR Surround Sound receiver. Now we zoomed into the face of the AVR Surround Sound receiver, and on the screen it says that we're set to HDMI 1. You might recall earlier in the video we plugged into HDMI 3 for 4K content, or HDMI 5 if we're not connecting to a 4K device. You may have plugged into HDMI 1, 2, or 3. Regardless, you're now going to need to set the input on your surround sound receiver so that it's displaying the Roku image on your TV. In this case, on the face of our surround sound receiver, we have input. So we're simply going to scroll across to HDMI 3. As well, our television also needs to be set to the correct input so that whatever video and audio comes out of our AVR is displayed and heard on our television. So we're going to pick up the remote control that actually came with the television and locate the input or possibly source button on your remote and press it until we see the display of the Roku and the AVR on the TV screen. And as you can well see, applications from the Roku are now being displayed on our television through how to connect the Roku to an AVR surround sound home theater system. If you have questions pertaining to any point, you can always back up in the video and rewatch it. This concludes this video on how to connect a Roku to an AVR surround sound home theater system. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below the video. Here are a few video links we hope you might find useful. If you liked this video or it helped you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe free to our channel. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.